Hey, Rajiv, I appreciate your time, brother. I appreciate you, coming in and joining us in this virtual environment and discussing a little bit about LinkedIn. We get a lot of questions about LinkedIn and how the services can use LinkedIn and things like that. So, really, I want to have a conversation with you today and talk to you about, some of the best practices of the platform. And I guess if you can first just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Rajiv Srinivasan. I work for LinkedIn, and where I'm on the enterprise side of the house, where we sell products and services to large corporations. I work on the global team, where I manage a team that vends these services to our global clients, what are our highest tier of clients across the globe. And so I've been at LinkedIn now, not very long, relatively, about 2 years. Prior to that, I was at a company called VMware. And then prior to that, Mobile Iron, just generally speaking, have had a career in software sales out in Silicon Valley. And prior to that, I was in the service. I graduated from West Point and went to 2-1 Infantry out at Fort Lewis, Washington, and was part of Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan and Kandahar. And then came back, decided to move to the private sector. And so that's a little bit about me.
Wow. Okay. So, all right, given what you know about, your time in the military and then LinkedIn as a platform, when you look at like the government agencies and organizations, how can we use or start to effectively use LinkedIn as a social media platform?
I mean, Quanda, I'd say that that's a very broad question, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that it depends on the user's intent, right? So I think first and foremost, let's look at every individual soldier, sailor, airman, marine, whatever, as first and foremost a professional, right? We are a part of a profession, and owning your professional identity is absolutely key. And I think when you wear a uniform, particularly in the military, it is very easy to sort of just appropriate the military as your identity and make that pretty much everything who you are. The problem with that is that at some point, everyone's time in the service comes to an end, right? Everybody moves on to a different career. More importantly, at some point, even in your military career, you may need to engage people from the private sector, people from media, people from industry, people from manufacturing, vendors, the military industrial corporations, right? You may need to get information and knowledge from other people that are not in uniform and easier to access and not a part of our culture. So I think first and foremost, as an individual, as a professional, it is important to realize that the military doesn't exist in a vacuum. You've got to get outside your comfort zone to be a better military professional. You also got to realize that at some point, your time in the military is going to come to an end. You'll want some options outside of that. You want some just general awareness of the global economy. And that's, to me, what LinkedIn is a great tool for, right? You get yourself a profile, build a network. You're going to meet people at bars, meet people at conferences, meet people on vacation. Add them on LinkedIn, right? It's not that hard. It's not that invasive. It's a very easy thing to do to someone who has an interesting profile that you want to learn from and follow and keep in touch with. And as a result, your worldview will expand and you will become a better professional in whatever walk of life you choose. So I think first and foremost, let's just look at us all as individual, people, as professionals, just to be better at our own jobs and to open opportunities in the future. That to me is the first and foremost reason for us to open up LinkedIn profiles and be active on the platform.
Yeah, I love what you just said. And, one thing I keep hearing in my head is personal branding, personal branding. And like you said, in the military, we are a whole in a sense, but we're still individuals. So, when somebody's going about setting up that personal profile, we all know the basics, but what are some of the key things we can do to make sure that our profiles are engaging and getting the most, feedback from people we're trying to connect with?
Yeah. So remember, let's also say, I want to caveat something. You said the quote unquote most feedback. That's not exactly the word I would use, right?
Okay.
Because one thing that we got to remember here is quantity of engagement is nowhere near as important as quality. Right. Of engagement. You can have a profile that, there's some things we can put up on your profile that'll get you bombarded with inbound requests, but we're not going to do that because that won't necessarily be quality engagement that's valuable to you. So in that interest, the number one word I need you to keep in your head is authenticity. It's not about trying to craft a profile that will attract people that you want to speak with. The idea is to craft a profile that is uniquely you. Whatever your passions and interests are. In fact, before you even open up your laptop, I want you to sit down with a pen and paper and just be like, what makes Kwande Kwande? What makes Sterling Sterling? What makes Rajiv Rajiv? And I actually did that. And when I came out, I was like, look, I have a deep passion for books and reading. I believe reading makes me a better husband, father, professional, citizen. And I said, that's something that's unique to me. I read a book a week, and that's something that's unique for me. I said, hey, you know what? I love music. I love to rap. I'm an amateur rapper. I love to play guitar and piano. I used to play violin when I was a kid. So how can I incorporate music and art into my profile? I love conversation. I love dialogue. And so I got a LinkedIn Live license, and I actually broadcast content where I interview authors on my show called 99 Pages, where I interview authors about their books, particularly in nonfiction. So none of that had anything to do with like, oh, who am I trying to attract? It all had to do with showing my authentic self. And what that does is it puts me in a context where I am the best version of myself. I mean, even when we just, logged on before I think we started recording, Sterling, you were like, hey, man, I love the passion in your video. And that's what I'm saying, right? It doesn't matter what I'm saying. It's how I'm saying it. Right? You can see the passion in my face and I'm so excited to talk to you about books. Like, super nerdy, I know. But like when and honest to God, when people look at my profile and they're like, wow, this guy is really passionate. He's excited. They ask themselves, I wonder if this guy was playing for my team, if he could channel that kind of passion for my company, for my mission, for my project, whatever. I wonder what he could deliver. And that honestly has spurred so many conversations. Now, I'm very happy at LinkedIn. I don't foresee going anywhere in the foreseeable future. So I typically am not entertaining requests for new jobs, but they do come in. But I get asked, for advice from young people who are looking for jobs. I get asked for to give interviews. I mean, even this opportunity for me to come and speak with you all, really was sourced ultimately from my LinkedIn kind of engagement with the military. And so you just never know what kind of opportunities are going to pop up your way if you just are your authentic self on your profile.
Yeah, I love that. I think one thing that happens in social media is we're all chasing numbers in a sense. We see celebrities and brands that have all this engagement, all these fans and followers and so on. But I think you're right. It is about quality. Because I can say for myself, I don't get a ton of engagement on LinkedIn, but the stuff I do get is really good. Yeah. So that's a great tip. You mentioned that you were an amateur rapper.
Yeah.
Can you give a quick LinkedIn rap real quick if you feel comfortable with that?
Oh man, are you gonna edit me in, or are you gonna edit?
If you don't want to, don't worry about it. But don't worry about it.
Oh man, what's funny? So we actually have our sales kickoff coming up now. And one of my senior leaders at the company has actually asked me to write a rap for our sales kickoff. And it's what I wanted to do was actually do something that was sort of like emblematic of our mission statement.
Right.
And so it goes like, so let's be clear. We're going to change what the world calls fair. It's not a meritocracy to try to compare those born in poverty to those born millionaires. It's a genetic lottery that just doesn't care. When a job opens up, now the status quo is hiring managers just go back to the people they know. Past colleagues, golf buddies, or old frat bros. They not bad people, but they just not exposed to the parts of society that could not afford to go to SAT prep or an Ivy League school. And now the C-suite knows that diversity grows the bottom line, and so they look to the CHRO. But that job is so hard, and it's getting even harder trying to change a culture and upskill a workforce that's told to retrain in their pandemic cage to make a living wage. Manage too much to try to solve a problem alone, so they pick up the phone. Give LinkedIn a chance to bring a victory home. From New York to Shanghai and Sydney and Rome, we are the platform to find the job where you belong. I'm not just a seller, I'm a champion of a free labor market without distortion. So before it gets worse, let's chart a course to bring economic opportunity to the global workforce.
Hey, I love it.
So that's kind of what I wrote. So,
So
anyways,
you're what do you say? You're a socially conscious rapper. So I
Yeah,
like
I know, right?
trying to be, man. You know, I mean, that's the thing. Art,
Mr. Hall, yeah, you can take it from here. Any more questions?
it's like your art's how we express those things that
Right.
we feel in our instincts and yet may have
Right.
trouble conveying in logic. And so that was something I was able to put together.
Yeah. I'll say one more quick thing and I'll move on. But no, I love what you said just about being yourself. You know, I think so many people online are trying to copy somebody's profile or what somebody says. But, you know, I think it's really important to find out who you're targeting and just be yourself.
Yeah.
So that's really important. Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure, man.
Yeah, I did have a question about you mentioned a little bit about LinkedIn Live, and I know that's something that they're starting to roll out on their end. And you mentioned I hear a lot about like representing yourself as a leader or as a, you know, I'm trying to compare everything to our leaders in the military and everything. So how can we kind of utilize that or maximize that effort using live video? I mean, what are the best ways to do that or best approaches?
You know, this is something that I think is an evolving space, right? So if you look at the live platforms, whether it's YouTube Live, Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, I mean, people are out there on a variety of platforms doing live broadcasts. There's live gaming, right? I think we still don't know what we don't know. What is the value of live? So I think the first question to ask is, how do we compare live content to just static content, basically content that I upload after editing and that's potentially higher quality? What is the value of live? So when it comes to live, there needs to be a sense of urgency, a sense of the moment, right? When President Biden gets on and gives a live address to the nation, he is delivering something that's mission critical for that everyone wants to understand and pay attention to. And the time is critical of the essence, right? So we want to see that live. If it were pre-recorded and uploaded and I just catch it in the feed later, it might, you know, the importance of that, the decisions that I've made in that delta of time, especially if you're in the service, right? A senior leader in the service, that could be very important, right? That's a big delta of time. So we got to think about like, what is the value of live? To me, the value of live is if you have something that is time sensitive, like mission critical, time sensitive, where the audience wants to be engaged now. Now I get it. There are a lot of people whose followings are so passionate and engaged that if, like, let's say a Kanye West goes live, he's a Snoop Dogg goes live, there are going to be a whole lot of people who just want to hear what that person wants to say, and they're going to tune in. But for the mass majority of us, we don't have that kind of, clout, particularly in a just general business context. It's very hard to justify like that sense of urgency, that sense of the moment. So I think particularly for LinkedIn Live, the reason why I use it is because I want to engage a small but dedicated following so that when I have, let's say, a live, an author, I want the audience to feel free to ask questions and answers and feel engaged in that conversation. So that's why I like live content versus, recorded and edited content. So if you're a leader and you're thinking about, higher levels of engagement, we got to think about the kind of engagement we want. If really what you're trying to do is be heard and just get a message out there that is not necessarily time sensitive, honestly, live isn't really going to do you any favors. Live is really valuable, I think, for particularly military leaders or business leaders when we want to actually have more engagement than just a like, a click, a comment. And we don't want to just be heard. We want to have a conversation. And so live can be a very valuable tool to say, all right, I'm going to get up here. I'm going to give a 5-10 minute brief on, this is the state of the world in our organization. I would love to field some questions from the audience. How do you feel about this? And then you can react in real time. And in that real time reaction, people see who you really are. Right? When you get asked a hostile question, when you get asked a question that everyone's kind of one of those, those questions where everybody's thinking it, but no one has the guts to actually say it aloud in a town hall. But when I'm on digits, it's just a little bit easier for me to poke somebody in the chest. When those questions get asked to a leader and they have an opportunity to empathize, to say, look, I get it. this must be on your mind. This decision, I know it made a lot of people unhappy. We don't necessarily understand where it came from. I want to tell you a little bit about the rationale behind the decision. I want to tell you how much I empathize with all points of view. And then even though you may not disagree with me, I hope you can, at the end of the day, respect me and the decisions that a leader has to make sometimes. And so that to me is where live can be really helpful, is to create conversation and to showcase your authenticity as a leader in a time when people may doubt that, doubt your judgment. So hopefully, Quan, does that answer your questions? That help on when to use live and when to just upload content that gets more views?
Yeah, it does. I like the fact that you keep harping on authenticity and being your true self and having that opportunity to engage, because engagement, I think, when you look at the other platforms that are out there, engagement plays a big part, in getting your reach out and getting your word out. So, and I'm assuming that LinkedIn works in the same manner, like engagement. The more engagement you get, the broader your message goes.
Yeah, but what I would say is, first off, you look at Facebook has 3 billion members on their site, right? Twitter is something 2.5 billion. LinkedIn has 750 million, right? It is a fraction, like less than a third. It's roughly 25% of Facebook's following. The value of using LinkedIn isn't like the size or the quantity of engagement, right? In fact, I actually never try to judge my content by how many people watch it, right? I care about the quality of engagement, meaning, are people reacting to it? Are they sharing it? Are they talking about it? Are people reaching out to me, even on my cell phone? If people, like, I can't tell you how many times I've done an interview with, say, a big name author. I did an author with Sebastian Junger recently. And even though, and don't get me wrong, the video did very well, but I had friends texting me. He's like, dude, that was one of my favorite authors. The book War changed my life. The book Tribe was really important to me. Thank you so much for bringing him on. And that's when I know that I'm actually, an influence in people's lives, right? Being an influencer is a vector, right? It's not just about quantity, it's about depth. I personally would rather be a very meaningful influence in a smaller audience of people's lives than like a very thin layer of influence on like a ton of people's lives, right? And I think that when we focus on quality engagement, not only do I think we get a broader reach over time, right? Because like-minded people will find you, but I think you end up finding more opportunities for yourself as well. And so, yeah, man, I think it's all about getting away from like this, and I understand that's how like many marketing agencies and marketing departments work, because they want quantity eyeballs. But even when we go in front of our large enterprise customers, and whether we're talking about advertisements for products and services or jobs, when they're advertising jobs on our platform, we really focus on like the quality of engagement, the quality eyeballs, because it's very easy to spend a lot of money on ads with zero return. And so in an enterprise context, there's actual dollars associated with some of these movements on social media. So from an individual context, just my personal engagement and stuff like that, it's the same thing. Your time is valuable. You ain't got time to be sitting there, and you don't want 50,000 followers if you ain't got time to sit there and engage all of them, right? Yeah, you got to think about like how much time you want to invest and get the biggest bang for your buck. So that's why I focus on quality, not quantity.
Great. You talked a little bit earlier about stories. I'm sorry, about live. And I know one of the new features now is stories on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. Talk about what kind of things you should share in your stories to kind of, take your messages farther. What should be shared in stories?
So I'm still learning myself on this, right? Okay. And, keep in mind, stories have been around for a long time. Instagram and Facebook had stories long before LinkedIn did. And, what's interesting is that it's very easy to look at LinkedIn and say, oh, those guys aren't innovating. Those guys aren't innovating because they're just copying the story feature. They're just copying the feed. But what's interesting is that designing these features for a professional context requires a lot of critical thought. It is very different to share something on LinkedIn where the means of paying the bills, right? Are going to be affected by what you share on LinkedIn. You can literally gain or lose opportunities, lose credibility that affects your line of business, right? So the implications of a story on LinkedIn are far different than on, or even a Snapchat or something like that disappears overnight. So for me, a story is an opportunity to share snippets of your personal life that affect your professional life. So, for example, and I think this was particularly important during the pandemic, where the lines between work and home blurred substantially for many of us. And so for me personally, I used it as an opportunity to showcase a bit of my personal interests outside of the office or outside of my home office, right? Because one thing is that when we were going into the office every day, I could say things like, oh, yeah, I'm going out to dinner with this friend from college after work, or I'm going to this happy hour with a former buddy from the army who I served with. And those kinds of like snippets of my personal life, or hey, I'm going this weekend, I'm going skiing or mountain biking, those little snippets of my personal life kind of added dimension to my personality and to my profile, in my real life profile, like how people actually viewed me. So what a story became for me during the pandemic was an opportunity to like show people in a small 1-day picture or 1-day clip, a piece of my personal life that they wouldn't get to see otherwise, particularly because we're not going to the office, right? So I live right now in Lake Tahoe. I have a vacation home here. It's become my primary home during the pandemic, during quarantine. And so, I had a baby daughter during quarantine. So occasionally I'll say, hey, especially she was wearing like a LinkedIn onesie and was watching my TV show on YouTube. And I took a picture of that. I was like, oh, my biggest fan, that's really cute. So that was an opportunity for me to showcase that, and then sometimes I go mountain bike riding or I'll go skiing. And if I see a beautiful vista that's, quite literally in my backyard, like I want to share that as a story. And what's great is that stories aren't like stapled to our profiles, right? They disappear. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to post something that's somewhat personal because it's going to go away. It's not going to be a part of your, a job or a recruiter or something like that won't see it. But what's really cool is that the people who work for me or people who work with me, customers, people get to see a little bit of my personal identity. And I think that's been very valuable in creating a three-dimensional persona during a pandemic.
Well, that's good, man. I like that. It's interesting because, so I use LinkedIn basically to kind of amplify my whole social media presence or social media expertise, if you will. So
yeah,
pretty much just kind of use it to, basically I find other information. Very rarely do I create my own stuff. I guess if I'm in the schoolhouse, but
yeah,
my own articles, I find those articles and then I kind of broadcast them to my fan base, knowing who's following me, knowing that most of the people who have attracted themselves to me or attached themselves to me on LinkedIn have been like public affairs officers, communication strategists around the world. So, it'd be interesting to kind of use that live or those story aspect and kind of show that other side, I guess.
absolutely.
I hadn't figured out how to necessarily do it. I don't live on Lake Tahoe, unfortunately.
Well, that's all good. And here's the thing, right? I'm very, blessed in this regard, right? Where I kind of have sort of shareable content that's kind of like organically around me. But what I don't think people understand is like even the small elements of your daily life that we take for granted, whether it's just the ritual of making a cup of coffee, if you got on a treadmill and went for a run and you hit accomplishment and you did something that you're proud of, like those moments which seem so like basic, they seem so like passe, like they actually can tell a part of who you are and they're actually meaningful. And so what I would say is the small moments in your day where you feel that little spark, don't take for granted that you're the only one who would relate to that moment. So whether it's just giving your child a hug or kiss goodnight, whether it's making your cup of coffee, whether it's pouring yourself a cocktail at the end of the day that you're proud of, watching an article or a TV show that really inspired you, a book that you're reading. Sometimes I'll take a photo of a book that I'm like, whoa, this changed my life. This is really important stuff. I encourage people to read it. Those little moments in your day where you have that spark, that's part of being human. That's a human condition right there, right? Share that. Those aren't just moments for Kwande and Sterling. Those are moments that we can all relate to.
Yeah, I like that. Hey, so are there any like big companies or anything that are doing LinkedIn well, would you say, that you've seen?
Oh, tons. Yeah. I mean, look, LinkedIn's been around since, for like 15 years now, 16 years now. I mean, there's Actually, I think it's 18 years. Excuse me. Yeah, there are plenty of companies that are doing LinkedIn very well. I like to think that many of them are actually in technology. Many of them actually are, could be arguably our competitors. I think a lot of the management consulting companies do them very well. McKinsey, Accenture in particular. I follow them very closely. I think I learn a lot from their research. Definitely all the news media companies are doing a great job. I mean, yeah, most brands that want to engage a professional audience are doing very well on LinkedIn. Even companies that you wouldn't think are necessarily trying to engage a professional brand, but are trying to engage a even brands that are not necessarily overtly trying to engage a professional audience, but are trying to increase their their image and broaden their influence, are doing very well. I think Nike is a company that, very surprising to me, has done very well on LinkedIn. I think, and more importantly than just the brands and the companies, what's really interesting to me are specific executives or CEOs that have done very well on LinkedIn. It's been very impressed. Like Larry Fink of BlackRock has done, I think, one of the more stellar jobs on LinkedIn. Even Satya Nadella, who obviously Microsoft owns LinkedIn, but Satya Nadella's presence, I think, is extremely admirable. He's not afraid to get involved and talk about social issues too. He's obviously head of a $2 trillion corporation. He's got his own purview. He's got other interests. But like, if something speaks to him, particularly say COVID in India this past quarter, I mean, he spoke out on it, and I thought that was really admirable. He uses his platform well.
Hey.
Again, it kind of gives a sense of like humanity to these like titans of industry, if you will.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I would love to start seeing more, like, especially like military leaders start to, really kind of share those key insights that they have, with their truth or with whomever,
Absolutely. And look, my personal preference, right? Everybody, you got to build your own identity. You got to build your own profile. But to me, LinkedIn is not you don't need to make your LinkedIn profile if you're a senior military leader. It doesn't need to be I guess let's put it this way. It's your profile. It's not the military's profile, right? It's your profile, meaning you should be talking and looking like yourself, right? Like, I personally didn't wear a uniform in my LinkedIn profile when I was in the service. I wore civilian clothes. I personally did not talk a ton about what I was doing in the military or the specific things about the military that I was involved with. I was more interested in engaging on other issues that I was passionate about. And I think if done well, what LinkedIn can be is a way to humanize a leader in the military. And I think, bring your authentic self to the platform. And I think, the military's hierarchical structure is kind of a relic of like a World War II type environment, right? We live in a world right now where I can manage as an individual. Realistically, I can manage up to, 15 people, right? I think it's anywhere between 7 to 15 people is realistic to manage. I mean, the ratio of manager to, let's say, team member right now is one of the highest ratios it's ever been, right? Because communication, the speed of the internet, I can not only manage more people, but I can manage them across the globe, right? I can communicate across the globe. The fastest growing companies in the world are flat, right? They're not designed to have layers and layers of bureaucratic management. Whereas the military kind of has that structure, right? It's still left over where we have layers and layers of bureaucratic management, where it's almost still like a 4-to-1, follower to leader ratio. When I think about just like the infantry, a rifle team, there's, 4 people on a rifle team, 2 rifle teams to a squad, 4 squads to a platoon, 4 platoons for a company. Like, that's not a very flat organization at all. And so in that layer of bureaucracy, say a battalion commander, like an 05 type, commander, will be their personality, their value system, their humanity is going to be highly filtered and abstracted from that, E4 on the ground, right? And so as a result, that E4 will look at the orders coming down through various filters and may not understand kind of the value system behind it. And this is, I think, where LinkedIn can play a powerful role. Is it gives an opportunity for not only a leader to broadcast a little bit of their humanity and their value system, it gives them an opportunity to even engage directly with that E4. And I know we have when my experience in the military, the quote unquote open door policy had a little asterisk next to it, as long as everybody up until that open door knew you were going to go to that open door and they could follow up. It's like, hey, what did that soldier say? I want to figure that out. So that asterisk, in my opinion, goes away on the internet, right? And I think that we live in a time where institutions are flatter, hierarchical and patriarchal systems are dissolving, where we value the input and the contribution of every level of command and every level of service, every eyeball, every feedback, every piece of logic that can provide value does not need to be filtered through bureaucratic layers of experience. We can collect those inputs in real time. And I think that every leader needs to be secure in the fact of people, that are more junior to them, engaging with those more senior to them and feel secure in that. And it's like, hey, it's okay. Takes a big leap of maturity to do that. And I'd encourage leaders, to engage people that are lower and higher than them, multiple, like the more communication is an asset. Filtered communication is a liability, right? I think we need to embrace that value. And the more that the E4 on the ground can get a sense of humanity of what that O5's life is like in their value system, you know what? When he gives the order to charge the hill, you better believe that E4 is going to feel a lot more resolve and confidence in the order and how that decision was made. And that to me is a benefit of using technology. It is not, it can actually be a real tool to harness.
Great. I have a follow-up question. So what if you are managing a organizational page for your command, and you still have your personal page? How do those two work together? How does the company organization page work together with the personal profile? Can you give some tips on how to, post on both different pages?
Oh man, that's a tough one, right? Because look, if you're responsible for an institution's social media presence, that is a tremendous responsibility, right? The things that are posted on social media can go viral in the heartbeat. You post one bad thing, you post, the stories we could talk about are endless, right? Of somebody who thinks they're on the personal side of their profile and accidentally send something on the institutional side of the profile, right? I in my career working with people in marketing and social media, that happens more than you would think. Most institutions, companies have multiple filters that prevent and multiple checks that prevent unauthorized access to a social media profile in a so that someone doesn't accidentally put their personal info on there. Now, that is not necessarily, these aren't tools that are necessarily privy to just like a military command. Number one rule of advice, in my opinion, is different devices, right? It is so easy to automate login right now. And it should be, right? Especially, we have certificates, passwords by themselves are becoming more and more arbitrary. And we are now actually looking for the device's authenticity and the user's authenticity before we just, let people in. The problem is that, like, let's say you are logged into two profiles, a corporate profile and your personal profile on one device. Switching between the two, particularly on mobile, is an act of finesse, and it's not something that I necessarily trust. So rule number one is, if you are responsible for a institutional page, a commands page, for example, keep it on your laptop. Don't log into it from any other device. Keep it very isolated. That way that when you're at work and you're responsible for engaging on that, page, just, that's all you need. Right. I actually, when I was doing something similar, I actually created a totally separate profile just and gave management access to the page to that profile in order to make sure that they were completely separate. So my personal profile had nothing to do with the institution's page. So those are things you can do to kind of de-risk the situation. But yeah, ultimately that is a vulnerable place to be, and I empathize very seriously with those who carry that responsibility. just be very deliberate and careful and responsible. Just know that the voice of your institution is on your shoulders, and you got to take that responsibility seriously in our industry.
Yeah. Hey, I noticed you mentioned you were talking about there's a lot of hesitancy with especially with leaders or with just people in general when it comes to social. You know, they don't want to communicate anything or show like a personal side or what have you. I mean, what advice would you give to people like that? What do you say to those people who are just anti-social media?
I would say that, you know, behind every single person's identity, so we all carry multiple identities, right? Behind our professional identities as a commander, a soldier, investor, a customer, an employee, there is a deeper identity as a husband, a father, a mother, a wife, a brother, sister, son, daughter. Those identities, and a friend, obviously, those identities are way more powerful and way more motivational than any of these like LinkedIn titles, if you will. Like, oh, I'm an investor, I'm an employee, I'm a soldier, I'm a commander. Like, at the end of the day, those kinds of like labels that we think are super important, they actually aren't. Right? At the end of the day, we've been at war for 20 years. If you've been in the service long enough to be a commander, you've probably been deployed, and odds are you've had a brush with mortality. You've had to contemplate what life would be like if you were not on Earth, right? What would life be like for your loved ones? Think about that. Think about what that thought process you went through. I almost died like 4 times in Afghanistan, right? Like, and every time it happened, I had to think like, what is really important to me? Like, oh my God, what am I so sad about missing out on? What are those moments? You'd think I was thinking about my title or my command, you know, like none of that mattered, right? I was thinking about my family. I was thinking about my sister. I was thinking about my girlfriend at the time, right? Like, that's what was really tugging at my heartstrings when life was on the line. And what I would ask people to do is remember that, right? At the end of the day, like, our jobs, our professions, our titles, they're just clothing on top of our souls and our identities. So if we start with that premise, and you are a commander, and your job is to motivate 1,000 soldiers or 1,000 sailors, 1,000 airmen, 1,000 Marines to greatness, what message do you think is going to pull at their heartstrings more? One that is directed at their military rank and grade and MOS, or one that's directed at their value systems, one that speaks to who they are as human beings, right? So if that is our mission, actually reach down into someone's soul and touch them, like, you got to come at them as a human being, not as a rank. And that is where social media can be an asset. It can be a tool. Is you get to reach out and show a little bit about your heart and your soul and your vulnerabilities, your insecurities, your strengths, your values, and it humanizes you. And now when Commander Joe Schmo gives, Specialist Rajiv Srinivasan an order, and I've seen Commander Joe Schmo over the years just kind of expressing their thoughts, their reactions, their critical thinking skills. I've been seeing their engagement and what they care about, what they don't care about, setting an example of communication. And they give that order, I have a little bit deeper sense of empathy for this person. They become more than a rank. They become a character in a story that, I can respond to and empathize with. And so, being scared of social media to me is like being scared of the iPhone in 2007. It's being scared of fax machines in 1960. It's like, yeah, times change, and I know it's hesitating, but, think about all the opportunities that it affords you.
Yeah, that's good. That's probably a good place to end. I want to wrap up. I don't want to take your time. But Rajiv, man, I appreciate your time, and I love the fact that you harp on the whole authenticity piece, the engagement piece. I mean, it's just, at the end of the day, I think it's about being human. It's about using this line of communication and this form of communication to be the best possible you that you can be. So, again, brother, I appreciate your time. Sterling, I don't know if you got anything else to add.
No, that was great. I feel smarter. I feel whole now in that piece. So I'm motivated to
Oh,
get
don't give me
on.
too much credit, man. Don't.
I'm ready. I'm ready to get on LinkedIn and social media and show my true self. So thanks again.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Pleasure, and I appreciate everybody's service out there. You know, these are tough times to be in the service, and sometimes it can feel like there's a lot of opportunity cost to being in the service. It can feel like no one's listening, can feel like you're trapped, but just know that I've been there. I know what it's like, and I'm just very grateful for those who raise their hand and do the jobs that a lot of people don't want to do. So thank you.
That's awesome. Hey, again, brother, we appreciate your time, man. Thanks a lot.
All right.